There are stories that open quietly, and then there are stories that begin with a moment so powerful it shakes the soul. This one starts on a cold December morning in Connecticut, inside a private academy built for the elite, where a billionaire's daughter, born into wealth, wrapped in comfort, shielded from the world, sat alone in a silent universe she never asked for. Her name was Hannah Cooper, a 16-year-old girl born permanently deaf, living in a mansion that echoed with the things she could never hear. But everything changed the day the school's janitor, a man no one truly saw, pulled something out of his old canvas bag, something that would rewrite her entire life. If you believe in kindness, miracles, and second chances, make sure you like, comment, share, and subscribe right now. Stories like this deserve to be heard. Hannah grew up in a world defined by silence, but not the peaceful kind. It was the isolating, invisible silence that shut her out of conversations, secrets, laughter, and even arguments. Her father, Charles Cooper, one of the wealthiest tech investors in the country, spared no expense trying to fix her condition. Specialists, surgeons, international clinics, everything money could buy. But nothing changed. The world remained muted, and Hannah retreated deeper into a shell that even her father couldn't break through. She moved gracefully, her long brown hair tied back neatly, her notebooks always immaculate, her steps light, but her eyes held a heaviness she carried everywhere. A heaviness that only someone who had faced years of wordless loneliness could understand. The students at the academy admired her beauty, her poise, her father's power, but admiration isn't the same as understanding. Most kept their distance. Others whispered behind her back, assuming she couldn't sense their comments, never realizing that silence sharpened her ability to read faces, body language, and intention. She lived her life at the edge of a crowd she could see but never join. Her father loved her, yes, but he was a man of achievements, metrics, innovations. He tried to love her through gifts, expensive tutors, high-end devices, the newest therapies. But emotional closeness. That was a language he had never learned to speak, not even to a daughter who needed it most. And then there was the janitor. His name was Mark Ellison, a quiet man in his 50s with graying hair, worn work boots, and a face that held the weathering of a hard life, yet softened whenever he saw her. Mark pushed cleaning carts, fixed jammed lockers, swept hallways, tasks most barely noticed. But Hannah noticed. She noticed the way he treated her differently from everyone else. Not with pity. Not with fascination. But with patience. Warmth. Respect. He moved slowly when she was near, mouthed his words clearly so she could read them, and always greeted her with a nod that said, "I see you." He never tried to force her into conversations. He never stared at her hearing aids. He simply treated her like a human being who belonged in the world, not outside of it. What no one knew, not the wealthy parents, not the elite faculty, not even Charles Cooper himself, was that Mark had once been a specialist, a research technician who spent years studying neurological audio processing before tragedy crushed his life. A drunk driver had taken his wife and unborn child 13 years earlier. Mark quit everything afterward, his lab, his research, his ambitions, and worked jobs that required no emotional investment. The janitorial position at the academy let him survive without having to live. But fate, in its strange, stubborn way, wasn't done with him. One afternoon, Hannah sat alone in the music room, her favorite place despite the irony. The grand piano's surface reflected her face as she pressed her palm against it, feeling the faint vibrations of a note someone had played earlier. She couldn't hear the sound, but she imagined it, dreamed of it, craved it deeper than anything in the world. Music was the language she longed for, the one thing she wanted to experience just once in her life, not the muffled, artificial hum of assisted devices, but real sound. Mark found her there, seated quietly, her fingertips tracing the piano keys as though they were braille. He studied her for a moment, seeing a version of himself reflected back, a person cut off from the world through no fault of their own, yearning for something they thought they would never have. That day, for reasons he didn't fully understand himself, Mark approached her differently. He knelt beside her, pulled out an old, carefully sealed pouch from his canvas bag, and placed it gently on the piano. Inside was a small prototype device, silver, worn, with handwritten notes still taped to its sides. The invention he had abandoned years ago. A project he once believed could help certain types of neurological deafness bypass damaged auditory pathways. Hannah looked up, confused but attentive. Mark motioned for her to let him show her something. She hesitated, her heart thumping with both hope and fear, hope that maybe someone finally saw her, and fear that this too would end in disappointment like countless attempts before. Mark wasn't offering a miracle. He wasn't making promises. He simply asked her, with his eyes and steady hands, to trust him for just a moment. He connected the small prototype to her existing hearing device, adjusting the settings with the precision of a man who had done this thousands of times in another lifetime. Hannah sat perfectly still, though her pulse raced. And then, in one fragile, breathless moment, he activated it. At first, nothing. Just the familiar blanket of silence. Hannah's eyes dimmed, shoulders dropping. But then, something shifted. A trembling flicker. A vibration different from the hollow ones she was used to. Her eyes widened. Her lips parted. Tears gathered instantly. The world wasn't silent anymore. It wasn't perfect, not clear, not sharp, but it was sound. Real, genuine sound. A faint hum, a distant thrum of the heating system, the whisper of air moving through the vents, and then she heard something that shattered her completely. She heard her own breath. Her hand flew to her mouth as a sob escaped, soft, shaky, unfamiliar. A sound she had never heard before. Mark stood frozen, his own eyes filling, realizing the device he once created for strangers had just given life back to someone right in front of him. When Hannah's father found out, after the school called him in a frenzy, he arrived furious, terrified, overwhelmed. But when he saw his daughter turn toward him because she heard the sound of his shoes striking the floor, he dropped to his knees, sobbing into his hands. Charles Cooper had never cried in front of anyone, not even at his wife's funeral. But now he wept uncontrollably as Hannah embraced him with both arms. Years of distance dissolved in a moment of fragile, miraculous sound. News spread rapidly through the school. Teachers gathered. Students peeked. Some whispered that a janitor had achieved what the world's best doctors couldn't. But the truth was simpler. Mark hadn't healed her, he'd found the small, rare possibility everyone else overlooked. And he had believed in it, and in her. Charles Cooper asked Mark why he hadn't continued his research, why he had hidden his brilliance behind a mop and a broom. Mark told him the truth, that he once lost everything he cared about, and the silence of grief had swallowed him whole. He had stopped believing that anything he created could make a difference. But Hannah had changed that. She reminded him that even broken hearts can still build miracles. As Hannah continued testing the device in the following weeks, her world blossomed. Birds outside her window. Raindrops on the school roof. Laughter echoing across the hallways. The sound of her father calling her name softly, unsurely, lovingly. For the first time in her life, she heard the world, and the world, for the first time, felt open, alive, and warm. Charles made Mark an offer the very next month, not a reward, not charity, but partnership. He asked him to rebuild the research he abandoned, restore the work that could change thousands of lives. Mark hesitated at first, but Hannah convinced him with a single gesture. She placed her hand over his and mouthed two words he could read perfectly.